What's up, YouTube? Hope everybody's having an awesome Friday evening. Hopefully you got some F&M dubs. It's pretty dark in here. Sorry about that. It's a little dark at the time of recording. Can't do much about it. No sunlight. But anyway, we played a little Jun Shadow on stream yesterday. Another user named Sadistic Sage offered up the idea of Questing Druid as a potential inclusion of Jun Shadow. If you play a lot of Legacy, you've probably seen Questing Druid show up recently. It's 1 in a green for a 1/1. Gets a +1/+1 counter on it whenever you cast a red, blue, black, or white spell, so anything but green. And it's got an adventure side where for 1 in a red, you can exile the top 2 cards of your library and play them until your next end step at instant speed. So 1 red, instant, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You can play them until the end of your next end step, or until the beginning of your next end step. So a little bit of a card advantage, a little bit of a threat, a little bit of a value piece, and kind of wanted to see how it got tested out. We started off with 3 copies yesterday, ended up cutting the 3rd copy to go back to a Bone Crusher Giant, and cut the 4th Unholy Heat for the 4th Lightning Bolt for this league. I kind of wanted a little more proactivity, especially with Questing Druid, able to hit a little more stuff that you're always going to have a target to cast, where Unholy Heat's a little less consistent. But for the most part, like the main deck, I've been very impressed with. The Fables, the Croxes, Goyf, Bowmaster, Shadow, Ragavan, all the removal. Really, really great. I think if you're wanting something that's like good against Scam, good against Murktide, good against any of like the fair mid-rangey decks, and has a reasonable time against the Omnath shells, then I think this is a deck you want to check out. In the sideboard, 2 Blood Moons, a Battle Rage, 2 Terrace Under, 2 Collector Roof, a Terminate, 2 Engineered Explosives, a Damping Sphere, 3 Nihil Spellbombs, and Giganta. So as you can see, post board, we are very geared for like Tron, Amulet Titan, Living End, Reanimator, anything unfair that we can't just like kill or play a bigger threat than. So looking out for that stuff. Yeah, other than that, let's just go ahead and go over some of the games here so you can see what the deck looks like. Again, Questing Druid, kind of the big testing piece. As always, as we get ready for this first match. If you're enjoying the content, enjoying the commentary, feel free to drop a like, drop a subscription on YouTube. Doesn't cost you anything, just lets you know whenever the new videos go live. Otherwise, we'll have a link to the Twitter down below, a link to the Twitch channel in case you want to come check out a live stream. And that's about it. So yeah, round 1 on the play. Ragavan on the play with a couple lands and a Fable. Kind of hard to throw back. If Ragavan lives, we get to Fable, ditch the second Ragavan. If Ragavan dies, we get a second Ragavan. So, whole bunch of options. A Bloodstained Mire makes me assume it's Scam on the other side. Stomping Ground, a little bit less so. I don't know too many decks going Stomping Ground into Bolt right now, so my thoughts kind of like Jun mid-range, Liliana's. Steam Vents throws that out the window. Steam Vents Ren and 6. So I'm kind of putting the pieces together and assuming it's creativity now, which the Thoughtseize confirms. Usually the presence of all red shock lands, red fetches, Ren and 6 kind of gives that away a little bit. So get to kill the Ren, but Teferi bounces the Goyf. This was kind of a greedy play. I could have played out the Goyf and the Ragavan. And my thought was, oh, they get to ice down the Ragavan, or they can just like tick up the Teferi and ice down the Goyf or something and make a chump blocker because they got the Bloodstained Mire. So I kind of want to pull ahead this turn. And I thought my best way of pulling ahead was like Questing Druid into land Goyf Ragavan, so I'm not like wasting mana. So I kind of greedily went for the land here. And as we can see, it did not pay out. So I end up having to just like dash Ragavan, get in a couple points of damage, and Unholy Heat the Teferi. Really not as exciting of a turn as I wanted it to be. But I didn't want to fall behind just like missing more land drops. So unfortunately, opponent's able to top deck a Fable, get a Dwarf token, so they got the ground pretty well clogged up. And now I'm like, okay, I need a way to rebuild, get ahead. So Fable into Ditch Croxa. They drew a Spell Pierce, and I decided to quality of life scoop there. Like, they've got the ground clogged up. They've got more land drops. I've got no momentum. I mentioned in the last video I was going to do, or try to do a better job of explaining sideboarding decisions. That seems to be something that people have a lot of questions about. Really want to take an extra second during the sideboarding process to talk about thoughts, what's coming in, what's going out. As far as cuts, usually for me when I'm sideboarding, I'm thinking first and foremost, what do I not want in the deck anymore? Because at the end of the day, there's a really good chance that whatever I have in my sideboard is better than what I actively don't want in the deck. So let me think about what I don't want first, and then I can start thinking about adjustments after that. So I don't want Ragavan in the deck. Between Wrenn and 6, Lightning Bolt, what's it called? Leyline Binding, Fire and Ice, fetches for Dwarven Mind. Ragavan just like looks horrendous here. So Ragavans I want to cut. Bowmasters I'm pretty not interested in. They're okay on the turn that your opponent goes for a dork into a creativity or a dwarf into a creativity for pinging off the dwarf. But there's a lot of times they're going to have more than one dwarf or Teferi or something like that, Veil of Summer. So it is a little bit of a liability. Finally, Croxa is a little bit slow. Like, turn 4 is the creativity turn. I don't want to be spending 4 mana escaping Croxa and then have my opponent just untap and put an Archon into play. So things I want to board in would be like any sort of instant speed spot removal. So extra terminates, fatal pushes, things like that to fight over dwarf tokens. I want to board in, if I've got like Pithing Needle or something like that, that's coming in. In this case, Blood Moon is fantastic. Engineered Explosives are fantastic. And I ended up bringing in so I brought in like the 2 EE, the 2 Blood Moon, and the 2 Terra Sunder, and the extra Terminate. The Terra Sunders because I saw Leyline Binding game 1, and because it's a good answer to things like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. You can kick it to take out a token. It does exile an Archon once you get to 4 mana. So it's got a reasonable amount of flexibility. But kind of my goal post board is turns 1, 2, and 3. I really want to be like developing my board. And then after turn 3, I never want to tap off of a way of dealing with a dwarf token. Because that's when you get yourself in a lot of trouble, is when you start like tapping out on turn 4 or 5 or whatever, tapping low and giving your opponent an opportunity to dwarf or creativity with protection back up. So that's why I'm like jamming this Fable turn 3, because I'm not playing it next turn when I want to be able to hold up EE, hold up Unholy Heat. So opponent, Leyline Binding's my Goyf, which is pretty fine. They fire down my token. Again, pretty okay. Since they tapped all the way down, I want to go ahead and fire off that Thoughtseize. We see Terra Sunder, Veil, double creativity. So right now, if they top deck a fetch land, I've got the Unholy Heat to take out the token. They don't top deck a fetch land, but they find a Wrenn, which is kind of okay. Like, I have to kill this Wrenn because I can't afford to let my opponent have 2 tokens to potentially creativity. We've already seen them miss land drops. They've got the Terra Sunder, so I'm kind of hoping they do exactly this play where they use up their mana to go get a Terra Sunder. Use up their mana to go and get a Stomping Grounds to Terra Sunder instead of going for way to fight over my Goyf or a token. And then this one was kind of weird. So I knew they had Creativity, Veil of Summer, Unknown. I cast the Bowmaster because I was hoping that my opponent would just like Veil of Summer in response to the Bowmaster, and I would just like get them tapped out, be able to kill the token, no questions asked, like not have to worry about what their last card is. When the Bowmaster resolved, I had to target myself because if I target my opponent, then they go down to 7 life if it resolves. But if they Veil of Summer, then Tarmogoyf stays the same size. There's already an instant. Bowmaster doesn't ping, and I don't get the token. So I add a whole extra turn onto the clock. But if I Goyf, Bowmaster, Army token, and I got the reflection, the next turn I can copy the Bowmaster, pump the Army token, and have 5 from the Goyf, 6 from the Bowmaster, 7, 8 from the Army, even if I ping myself. So I still have lethal, which is the important part here. Like, I got to resolve the Bowmaster. I need the Army token, but I don't need to ping them. But you get the idea. You can ask questions if you're confused about that in the comments, and I would be happy to explain it further. But it's just, I need the Army token, and I need them to not veil the damage so I can get the Army token. On to game 3. It's an okay hand. I've got Bowmaster, Fable, EEs. I've got ways to kind of play out to the board early. Opponent doesn't have a Wrenn and 6, which is extraordinarily nice. I start off on the EE here because I'm kind of hoping if they have like a Spell Pierce, I can just bait it. Because if I play my land first and they cast a Spell Pierce, I wouldn't be paying for it anyway. So I'm kind of hoping I can just like bait the Spell Pierce so I can get down Fable. But they don't go for a Spell Pierce. Instead, they go for Leyline Binding. So I'm assuming they don't have a Spell Pierce. So I'm just going to jam the Fable here. Give me kind of like the 2-for-1 board presence against another Leyline Binding or a Terra Sunder. And lo and behold, they do have another Binding. So token gone. EE gone. We'll ditch the Shadow in the Swamp. There's a reasonable chance I find another land. So like keeping the Shadow is not unreasonable. But if I find another land like I did, I can just get down double Goyf, and that's fine as well. Third Binding. But opponent is missing their land drops pretty aggressively, so that's helping us stay in this. Go ahead and fetch up the Swamp. We do have Blood Moon in the deck, so I want to give myself the basic in case I do find the Blood Moon off the draw there. And we want to make sure we keep an eye on the clock. So Goyf right now is a 5-6. The Bowmaster, Bowmaster plus the Orc Army is 7. So that would be a 2-turn clock if I get the Bowmaster down. Same argument as the last game. I end up Bowmaster pinging myself because if my opponent Veil of Summers the Bowmaster and stops me from getting the Army token and the ping, then it adds an entire extra clock or extra turn onto the clock. Because then I'm dealing 6 instead of 7. I can't do anything about them just having Fire and Ice there, but it would add an extra turn to the clock. Then Thoughtseize take Teferi because it would bounce my Goyf. They end up finding the third land, which is actually phenomenal for me because it means they just go for the Fable and I get the free win for Terra Sunder, get back my second Goyf, and kill off the token and attack in for lethal. So really fortunate there that our opponent decided to not put lands in their deck. Go figure, that would be a thing that helps us win a game of Magic. So round 2, opponent starts off with a Grief, ditching a Living End. Oh boy. Probably top 3 worst matchups for us. Tron, Living End, Maybe Reanimator. We see Grief. We see an Int. End up going for the Thoughtseize here, which sees double Force and... what was it? Double Force and Living End. So no Cyclers, no Cascade spell. We find a way to ping ourselves to get down both Shadow and Goyf. I could have gone for the Fable here, but I kind of wanted the clock. Like, if my opponent's missing Living End, then I want the clock. But, of course, their one blind top deck was a Violent Outburst. So, like, I could have gone for Fable, ditched maybe Shadow or something, kept Goyf to try to be able to get something back when they top decked the Living End. But, like I said, I was really hoping I would have the game over with before then, since they had no redraws in hand. So them just top decking the Living End right off the bat kind of stung. Sideboarding its Living End. It's pretty straightforward. I'm bringing in like Nihil Spell Bombs because they're the only grave hate I've got. If you've got Unlicensed Her or something like that, you can bring that in instead. I'm bringing in Blood Moon for the small chance that I can just cheese out a win with that. It's because it's a horrendous matchup. You need to have some way to fight on the unfair axis, and Blood Moon is kind of like our unfair axis. Turn 1 Rag, turn 2 Moon. And then what else do I bring in? Blood Moons. 3 Nihil Spell Bomb. And something else. Something else that I can't remember. Either way, not important. All you need to know is we don't have very good tools for Living In. Siding out a lot of the spot removal, the Unholy Heats, the terminates. Keeping in the bolts because they get a little, or give you a little bit of extra reach. And then boarding out a Fable and a Bone Crusher because big clunky 3-mana spells, not very good into deck that just like puts Graveyard into play on turn 3. So, opponent's got a Leyline of Sanctity. Kind of okay. We hope that we have turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Fable, and that kind of loots us into something good. Basic Island is okay. Obviously, Nihil Spellbomb into Leyline of Sanctity. Not your best friend. If you don't know, Nihil Spellbomb does say sacrifice it and exile target player's graveyard. So cannot target them with the Leyline of Sanctity. If you are looking for our alternatives, Soul Guide Lantern does not target. So what one of the things that I've been discussing with Sadistic Sage today is swapping out the spell bombs for Soul Guide Lanterns, because I think our matchup against decks like Scam and Murktide is pretty good, even without like the Nihil spell bombs. So I kind of want to just swap those spots into something that is really good against the unfair grave decks, and Soul Guide Lantern being able to get around Leyline of Sanctity, I think, is a good enough reason at the moment. You could also go Unlicensed Hearse if you want to, but honestly, I've been really, really unimpressed with an Unlicensed Hearse in like this matchup. It is kind of an okay in-between choice, but like if you don't have the Hearse out on turn 2, it's not going to do the job you need it to against decks like Living End. So, opponent's got the Grief. Go for the Questing Druid just to see if we can find something relevant to do. They've got the Violent Outburst during our combat step, which we do get back a Shadow and a Ragavan, so it's not like completely awful. Then we got Questing Druid from its adventure spot. We Thoughtseize ourselves just to get a counter on the Questing Druid. Still a 2-turn clock with the Curator, or the Curator plus the Wraith. Opponent gives us a potential out here by attacking all out. They do have the food token, but if we found like a lightning bolt, then we could potentially kill them. They found Shardless Agent. So all we have to do is top deck a way to answer the Shardless Agent, and we have a lethal attacker with our Shadow, which we do not find. So, oh well. Opponent gave us a chance of an out. They probably should have just sacked their food token, because they could have gone up to 13 and we're dead without Battle Rage. Oh, Battle Rage was the other card I brought in this league. That's right. Or that match. Alright, so round number 4, I believe. Looks like we are up against Scam this time. Bobble sees Unholy Heat, so we'll keep that on top. I really want the second removal spell because the follow-up for things like Dolthy or, what's it called? Oh my god, why can't I think? Fable. And yes, I do know I could have bolted the Dolthy first and then fetched and played the Ragavan. Should have done that. Hopefully it doesn't end up biting us. But opponent's got a Scam Grief here on turn 4, so they did manage to piece that together. They haven't killed our Goyf, so I'm assuming they don't have another Fatal Push or like a Terminate. But we get in a nice attack. We are currently winning the race. I think that Thoughtseize swapped it to where we were winning the race. Also could have added Gigantha, or no, we added Gigantha and it got Thoughtseized away. That's what it was. I was like, I could have added Gigantha. No, I already did add Gigantha. I did what I was supposed to do. Sideboarding against Scam. This is a sideboarding matchup that I'm feeling really comfortable with at the moment. So for me, I've been boarding out all the Ragavans because against opposing Ragavans, Bowmasters, Bolt, Terminate, Fable tokens, like Ragavan's basically never getting through. And then the Thoughtseizes, I'm more likely to board them out on the draw, but a lot of times I will board them out on the play because I think we just have a lot of really good removal for a turn 1 Scam threat that we're not so desperate to stop it before it happens. Things I'm boarding in would be the extra Terminate for sure. Answers turn 1 Scam Grief, Scam Fury, answers Dolthy on curve, all that stuff. Boarding in the Nihil Spell Bombs, all 3 of those. Boarding in... what else do I have in this list? 3 Spell Bombs. To Terminate. Oh man, why am I drawing such a blank here? I'll think about it as it goes, as we go along. But for the most part, I think like these Bolt, Unholy Heat kind of shadow decks, we've just got so many good value pieces that we're not really super pressured into worrying about the turn 1 Scam. Opponent gets in an attack with Grief, which means we can get down to turn 2 Shadow. Don't really care about this Hearse since you already took our Tarmogoyf. And it's kind of like a what have we got to lose Shadow. Like, hey, I'm either playing this or I'm doing nothing. If I'm doing nothing, I'm taking a hit. If I play it out, then I have a chance of winning the race. Which you do have to think about how the life adds up here a little bit. So, like, let's say I've got a 5/5 Shadow. I attack. If they don't block, they go to 12. If they attack back from 4 with the Grief, I go to 4. Fetch and shock down to 1. I have a 12/12 Shadow. Exactly lethal. So the progression lines up there if nothing out of the ordinary happens. I could fetch and shock this turn and go to 7. But then if they attack with the grief, I can't do 2 damage to myself. Well, I guess it would be 1 point lower, so it'd be fine. Works out the same. I didn't expect them to block with the hearse, but then as soon as they did, I kind of had the oh crap. I really hope they don't have a Bowmaster. Thankfully, they did not. And then they're down to needing a top deck to deal with the grief. I decide to use the adventure side of the Questing Druid because even if I whiffed, I could just play out the Questing Druid and block. Obviously, if they had a Bowmaster or something to kill my Questing Druid, then I lose. But luckily, we hit a bolt. We were able to kill the Fury or kill the Grief and have a good attack in. And then game 3, pretty low mulligan, unfortunately. Let's double check the mulligan decision on his first couple hands. So, first hand, no threat. I'm pretty adamant about mulliganing just about any hand that doesn't have a threat, because if you're not getting out to the board, you're going to have a tough time in a lot of matchups. You could argue that the baubles could maybe draw you into a threat, but I don't like that maybe. And then the second hand was no red mana, double Ragavan. Third hand, though, we've got Ragavan, we've got Questing Druid and Fable, which are both really good ways of kind of drawing us out of the mulligan a little bit. Roggen Triome, Temple Garden, Rin down my Ragavan, so some sort of 4 or 5 color Omnath deck. And they play a Kavu, and I'm like, I now have no idea what's going on. Is this Zoo with Rins? Is this 4 color, 5 color Omnath with Kavus? Like, what are we doing here? Pending's not usually a Zoo card. I end up just kind of scooping here because, like, I can't really afford to take 5 and deal with the Ren and not have a good follow-up to deal with the Kavu. But we'll go to game 2. I'm assuming that this is more Zoo because I saw the Kavu, and I think Kavu is like a pretty good Zoo giveaway. So I kind of sideboarded with that in mind, like take out a couple Thoughtseizes because they're a Bolt Tribal Flames deck more than likely. Trim on some Ragavans, trim on some Bowmasters. Bowmaster doesn't really kill anything. Ragavan, they have bolts. They showed us Prismatic Ending, Ren and 6. Rag's pretty bad in all those. Brought in Blood Moons, brought in Engineered Explosives, the extra Terminate, Terra Sunders to deal with things like Leyline Bindings, Scion of Dracos, can kick it to deal with Planeswalkers, whatever the case may be. So, kind of okay sideboard playing against Zoo. Then here we've got turn 2 Goyf. If they have a Kavu, then I'm really hoping that this Blood Moon will kind of shut them down a bit. I would say in these situations, try to be sneaky. Don't make it obvious that you have a Blood Moon. Like, you might, I know we have 2 basic swamps in the list, and I might have to give up one of those basic swamps to make sure they're not able to fetch optimally around Blood Moon. So you'll see me here, like, play the Goyf off the Nurturing Peatland, take an extra point of damage, not get a swamp, because I do not want my opponent getting suspicious that I have a Blood Moon. Like, I need them to fetch and shock and do all this stuff. And then they play up the Beanstalk, which I've seen some Zoo lists running up the Beanstalk recently, so that's not, like, out of left field. Solitude, however, I don't know if the lists I've seen played Solitude. They did play Fury, but Solitude, a little bit of a different one. Luckily, we've got this nice little Fable of the Mirror Breaker to help fight against hurting our own mana too much. Ditch a land. I could have ditched 2 lands, but I really wanted to be able to, like, play out the Goyf, play out Giganta next turn. And then 1 ring. So now I'm Assuming this is no longer Zoo. I don't know that for sure, but Beanstalk, One Ring, Solitude, um, Rin makes me assume 4-color, 5-color Omnath pile. And they're just like playing Kavu, I guess, is a reasonable beater. So that's why you see this. The sideboard plan like completely changes up, boarding out all these like bolts and heats and stuff that would be used to answer Kavus and Scion of Dracos and Neshoba Brawlers and all that stuff. And boarding back into the Thought Seizes, the Bowmasters. Um, I ended up trimming one of the Blood Moons because I showed it game 2. So going to game 3 on the draw, it's a little less likely to be effective. It might be able to get there, which is why I'm leaving one in, but I don't want to count on it to be there. And then Thought Seizing on turn 1 here instead of Ragavan, mainly because of the fetch that they played. So they played a Marsh Flats, which means they could get a Temple Garden, but Temple Garden's going to be a little awkward with their mana going forward. So if they had led with like a Wooded Foothills or a Windswept Heath, I might have been a little less likely to Thoughtseize. Probably still am, but it at least makes it a question instead of a certainty. Opponent goes for Leyline Binding. If you don't know this interaction, if you destroy or exile the Leyline Binding with the trigger on the stack, it doesn't resolve. Your thing doesn't leave the battlefield. So I get to make sure I get the extra damage in with Ragavan, which is pretty important against like the ring decks when you need that extra little pop. You need the damage in early. Because when your opponent does find their ring, and you know they'll find their ring because you don't play the ring to not find the ring, then you've gotten at least a little more damage in. I decided to play the odds here. So I could play out the other shadow. And if my opponent draws like 1-for-1 removal, then it looks a lot better. But if they find an Omnath and get to play a fetch land, then I don't have Terminate up. If they play a Solitude, then they get rid of both of my shadows and I've got nothing. So I decide just to risk it and say, hey, I'm not going to play out the other shadow. I'm going to hold up Terminate. And they ended up having the Prismatic Ending for a shadow plus a Binding for a shadow, or Binding for a Ragavan. So it looks a lot worse because I chose to play around getting completely blown out, but it ends up working out quite a bit better because, hey, I get down a shadow the next turn, I kill the Omnath, opponent draws nothing, and we win the game because, yay. Just how we drew it up. And then on to round number 5. No lands, no lands. So immediate mull to 5. Throw back a third land and a Thoughtseize just to try to keep all the action that I can. Plains Esper Sentinel lead me to believe it's Hammertime. Could be humans, but I think Ornithopter kind of solidifies that it is not. I was pretty surprised that they just threw out the Ornithopter there on the block. And then passed the turn, went to Bowmaster the Esper Sentinel on their upkeep. So if they had a protection spell for it, then hopefully they wouldn't be able to follow it up with a 2-drop, like a Pure Steel Paladin or Stoneforge Mystic. Unfortunately, they did. But I'm fine offering up this trade of Ragavan for Pure Steel. Since they don't take it, I have to just settle for getting a treasure, playing a Goyf, killing a Paladin. Hope my opponent doesn't have like a what's it called? The Forge Anew. But doesn't look like they do, but they do have a Saga. So that means we've got to be as aggressive as humanly possible, or shadowly possible, monkey pirately possible, and get the game over with before Saga takes over. But I think with double Goyf, Bowmaster, Ragavan, we should be able to do that. I hope. And yeah. Opponent decides that 2 Lurgoyfs is above the acceptable amount of Lurgoyfs in a game of Magic. Sideboarding against Hammertime. Ragavan. Horrible. Get him out. All the X or 1 X's in their deck. Just make Ragavan trade off with like any early threat, which they are more than happy to do. Fable's really slow. Croaks is really slow. And Croaks is really bad against Sanctifier on Vec. Bowmaster can ping some stuff off, but between Ornithopter, Stoneforge, Giver of Runes, Pure Steel Paladin, all being bigger than 1 toughness, it can be a liability. And they really don't draw that much. It's mostly like Stoneforge and Urza Saga card advantage that don't actually say draw a card. But every now and then you can get them with Pure Steel Paladin, play and equipment. So they're not the worst thing in the world. And then ended up trimming the Questing Druids because I was just looking for something a little more proactive. That being said, Questing Druid staying in is completely fine over like another couple Bowmasters because it is a green creature and stands in front of Sanctifier on Vec very well. Siding in, I brought in the 2 Terra Sunders, the 2 Blood Moons, because they deal with Inkmoth Nexus, Urza Saga, Canopy Lands, anything like that. The 2 Engineered Explosives, the extra Terminate. What am I forgetting? 2 EE, 2 Terra Sunder, 2 Blood Moon, extra Terminate. I am forgetting something. Basically just any sort of artifact, enchantment, hate, any spot removal. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, the 2 Collector Roofs. That's what I brought in. Mulligan decision. The first hand we saw... yeah, just slow and clunky. Like, we could pay for the bobble on turn 1 into an Esper Sentinel, but if they have Sanctifier, we're doing nothing. If they have a quick hand, we're doing nothing. This hand is more, hey, I'm able to interact a little bit early with Bolt. I've got double shadows, so if I get those online, then I can like attack around a Sanctifier potentially. Opponent hits us with an Esper Sentinel. We find a Bowmaster. They don't find a second land, and they actually end up just scooping the game right here. So we managed to beat Hammer Time game 2 without ever casting a spell. Don't get to see that too often. And yeah, that's it. Nice little 4-1. What did we think? Questing Druid. I was telling Sadistic earlier that I think I need to do a better job of identifying when I just want to play out Questing Druid as like a 1-1 and start adding counters. Because you do have a lot of cool turns where you start off with like a turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Questing Druid plus Thoughtseize, or just like turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Questing Druid, turn 3 Bolt your guy, play a Shadow, swing for 3. Next turn, play a Fable, swing for 4, stuff like that. And then if you haven't seen, Sadistic actually played against Young Dingo in a league last night, which you can go find it on Young Dingo's side. And I got to see a Questing Druid get up to like a 6-6 or something, 7-7. So pretty cool to see it when it actually gets rolling. Other than that, Fable, great. Croaksa, great. Bone Crusher, I'm really trying to tune the sideboard better. Make it a little more proactive against a lot of the unfair stuff where we have a lot of struggles against like Living In, where you saw earlier. You could go up to a bunch of Chalice of the Voids and drop Giganta in those matchups. But as soon as you don't reveal Giganta, your opponent kind of knows what's up. So be a little careful of that, but it might not matter if you're proactive enough with Thoughtseizes and things like that. Tron and Amulet Titan, can be kind of rough. So between Blood Moon, Battle Rage, Terrace Under, Collector Roof, Damping Sphere, hopefully you find some piece of interaction that slows them down and you can get the game over. Still not the most exciting matchups in the world. Other than that, like I said earlier, if you're wanting a good deck against Scam, good deck against Murktide, reasonable matchup into 4-color, not favorable, but you can hold your own. And any sort of like control deck you feel pretty good against. You just have to find a sideboard configuration to feel good against the unfair stuff. Then I think Jund Shadow could be the deck for you. Other than that, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Friday. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. I'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.